and as a result, he's rarely around. That's an environmental pressure on the family, on the spouse, and on the children because of his absence, okay? That's a physical reality, something that has happened to us. You go to school and you're bullied by another kid. We know those experiences from our childhood, and they affect us negatively. Or a teacher, someone you expect to be on your side, is opposed to you, okay? The environment does not always respond positively to us. It doesn't respond the way we want it to, because other people have their own issues, they have their own life commandments, they have their own weaknesses because of the fallen nature of human beings. We have to deal with the fact that the environment is the way it is, and we do not always have a key to make the environment respond the way we anticipate it should. But we rarely talk about what we don't have. And these things are external forces, and they're pretty obvious to us. You get in a car wreck, something happens to you, you're traumatized by being in the war and having to kill other people to defend your life, okay? We understand the environment produces stress, okay? And going back to the world we live in, this is a reality that is hard for us to deal with on a day-to-day basis sometimes, let alone as a child growing up into a family and learning about external forces and stressors that come upon us, simply because we do dumb things. Like, you ever notice that kids tend everything that's about the right height for a 2-year-old to run into? Coffee tables, whatever, they're gonna run into it, okay? And as a result, the environment doesn't always respond the way we anticipate it should. So those are environmental stressors. But there's another kind of stress that's not often talked about. And it's both a spiritual something and a difficulty for us to acknowledge because we don't miss it. And that is internal deprivations. What's a deprivation? Something that we should have gotten that we didn't. Okay? Something we didn't get. Sometimes it's because of the stress of the environment. For example, when I was little, I had asthma real bad, and I was in the hospital. I told you that. Okay? That produces external stress because I'm trying to breathe. But on the inside part, it also creates deprivations because my parents are absent. Okay? Because my parents are absent. And as a result, how do you think a child feels when their parent is absent?
Alone.
Alone. Perhaps abandoned. Okay? The significance of that abandonment stays with me in the old brain. Okay? So oftentimes the deprivation remains in the old brain. Okay? The unconscious. Everybody has deprivations. Everyone. Because we're in a world with the limitations we have, with the materiality we're living in. Everyone has deprivations from childhood. And our parents, who took care of us the best they could, had their own series of deprivations. Things that they didn't get. Because of the environment, on one part, and sometimes because of the effects of not getting something they needed. What would be some of the things that people need that they oftentimes don't get?
Love.
How has that expressed itself?
Well, for a turnover of stock, it depends.
No, just personally, how do you express love?
Oh, but you meant if you don't get it.
If you don't get it,
Hearing.
experiencing affirmation is one of the ways in which we get love. If I give you a hug, whether it's on the side or in the front, is it an affirmation? It is. It is an affirmation. I did an inner healing with a woman whose mother never touched her outside of taking care of her when she was an infant. Is that a deprivation?
Yes.
Something she should have had but didn't have. What did she want as a result of that? What did she do? The response of the child may be on both extremes. You become particularly, let's say, seeking that, promiscuous, or on the other side being so distant and disengaged that no one can get close to her or him. Okay? And a friend of mine who was a deacon in the church, when he was a little boy, he lived in Chicago. And there were 3 other families in this building. And nobody knew who was last, and so the last person was supposed to lock the door. The last people that came in. They all had, but they never knew who the last person was, so the door never got locked. People from the street used to come into his room at night. Now think about this for a moment. You're in a deep sleep. The next thing you know, you look up and some drunk is leaning over your bed. Does that produce some kind of emotions? Not being safe? Adrenaline? The person had kind of the first stages of what? Bipolar disorder. Psychologist told me, said, Mike, he needs inner healing. Okay? Guess what he did for, oh, and by the way, so he learned as a child to protect himself. And he slept at night with a baseball bat. Guess what he did for a living? Yes.
Wow.
Policeman. Guess what his family had to put up with? Violence. And he was borderline bipolar. Because of a deprivation of safety. Okay. Think about Israel for a minute. Was there a deprivation in Israel? What was it? You ever think about that? What was the deprivation Jesus came to fill?
Being saved.
What is the, and what is that you're right, but I'd like you to think about that in a broader sense. Jesus came to save, to do what?
Make a worse sense.
Yes, and what for why? What was the person reason for that? So we could live in grace. The Old Testament didn't know grace. It wasn't that they were bad. They had a deprivation. Grace and truth come through who? Jesus Christ. Jesus came to reveal the grace of the Father. What did they have instead of grace? They just had the law. And under the law, they put an innocent man to death on a cross. They could manipulate the law to actually go against God's own word. Think about that. Human beings, when we have a deprivation, we act negatively even against ourselves. So Jesus came not only to the environment, but to give us a new pattern of life in the Spirit. He says, unless I go, the Spirit cannot come. And what did the Spirit bring? The same resurrected life that Jesus had when he rose from the dead and now dwells in us, Paul says. And that is an experience of grace. In Romans, that's what it's all about. Grace comes through Jesus Christ. the grace to live through your deprivation into glory. Everybody's got deprivations. But we rarely talk about them in the church. We just pussyfoot around them, you know. We kind of deal with the fact that what we do, and we don't oftentimes think about why we're doing it. Because when there's a deprivation, we're not aware of the deprivation. If you don't have something, you may not be aware you're missing it. Think about that. Ever happened to you? Didn't know you missed it until you thought about it some. The expectation, for example, of your parents to be there when you need them. And because, for some reason, perhaps their own inability to give that kind of support to you, you lacked it. You don't know why you lacked it, or I don't know why I missed it, but I still miss missing it, even though I don't know what it is. The power of Jesus Christ in the Spirit is that He knows. And He renews us daily in His Spirit so that through grace we can be free from the yoke of deprivation. Now, psychologists will tell you, if you find out that there's something lacking, let's say, a parent died when you were 3 years old, or 5, or 10. And as a result, the other parent could not give you the kind of support perhaps you need. Maybe they were taking care of 3 other kids, da 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 da. This is the environment, the reality of life. Okay? But as a result, I'm missing something. I'm missing my daddy. Or I'm missing my mommy. I don't even know I'm missing them. But it affects the way in which I think about the world out there. Because the deprivation is significant. Significant enough that because I don't know it, the old brain says, aha, keep it secret. It must be terrible. It feels like death. Okay? So oftentimes we can't build attachments. A friend of mine who's a very handsome man, came to church all the time, you know, on Sundays. He went from one sexual encounter to another. He couldn't bond. There was a deprivation. He couldn't attach. He could do the chasing part. He could do the acquiring of the relationship part, but he couldn't make the commitment part. Sound like anybody today? Ladies, gentlemen, people have a hard time bonding. Why? Because marriages have been falling apart for so long. We don't have very many clear images of what it's like to be married in our society. 75% of marriages fail in Maricopa County. Does that create a significant deprivation? Huh? Yeah. Yeah, it does. Okay. So because of that, we have to deal with the fact that life has deprivations, and we need to be aware of what they are. What happens in Christ is He makes you aware of what the deprivations are in the Spirit. Part of inner healing is that we not only deal with the outside forces that came upon me because of simply the way the world is, but also what was lacking in terms of my ability to cope with those. There's a wonderful movie, Son of a Woman. A lot of it's kind of gobbledygook, but there's a great scene at the end of the movie where this guy who had been cared for by this young man in some ways, military guy, and the young man is being unjustly prosecuted by the school. And as a result, people who he had trusted to be that he wanted to be obedient to. There was a question about how he could do that. And as a result, the system came down hard on him. And this man comes to his rescue as if he's his parent who is absent. His parents are absent. So he comes into his life and rescues him at the end in front of the whole school. And speaks on his behalf. And he talks about the fact that he was a Vietnam vet. And then he says at one point, he says, to the whole student body, he says, I've been with people who've lost legs and arms and all different parts of themselves. And he said, but there's nothing to replace an amputated spirit. And he convinces them to take this burden off this young man of judgment. Jesus is speaking for you all the time. He is speaking up for you, and for the places where you feel the abandonment, for the places where you feel the isolation, for the places where you feel the loneliness and you can't put your finger on it, Jesus is affirming you. Jesus is lifting you up. We just have to ask him to do it. Activate the grace by moving into his new creation. And that simply is by saying, I don't know why I feel this way. Lord Jesus, make me aware of where the deprivation is, so that I can deal with the emotional content. I've been acting compulsively for a long time, doing the same old things, not being able to see any change or results. But yet I'm committed to doing the same mistake over and over again. Heal the deprivation that's underneath there. I sabotage myself over and over again by saying things that push people away, because I'm afraid I'll be getting them too close. Where's the deprivation? Where did I need to be held close and no one held me? You see, the story is, even in the story, stories oftentimes reveal deprivations. It's not what we have, but what we didn't get. It's not sometimes anybody's fault. But we don't know what to do about it, so we decide to go, back here to the pleasure world. Remember this? We go back to the pleasure world where we have compulsive acting in or acting out, trying to fill the deprivation with what's lacking, with what we can do for ourselves. Okay? And the more we do it, the less we get out of it. Remember that, the more we do it. So how do you get out of this? Stream of consciousness. You bring the deprivation to consciousness. And all of a sudden, you can go back. Jesus will take you back to the sandbox. I love that image. You'll go to the sandbox and play. A lot of times, people who have deprivations don't know how to play. When was the last time you did something fun? When was the last time you did something spontaneous? When was the last time you get out of your little comfort box and did something just for you? Ladies, you went not just shopping, but when was the last time you said and did something that was spontaneous, unscripted, didn't have to think about it a lot? You see, what happens with deprivations is that we start planning everything out, so we won't be disappointed if it doesn't work out the way we want. Or the spontaneity is somehow difficult for us to cope with because it's not within the plan. I know a man who was kicked out of his house because his family was poor and his parents had used him on the farm long enough. They had other boys who could now take over his job, and they said he at 16 years old, you are out of here. Now 16 years old is a pretty important time to be sorting out who you are, whether you're wanted, what you're going to attach yourself to when you're looking for a spouse, what are you going to be doing in terms of your vocation. And all of a sudden, his world was turned upside down. He was no longer allowed on the farm. And he survived the best he could on his own. When he went to get married, because he felt this deprivation in the old brain so harshly, he thought, well, whoever I marry isn't going to be a very good person because I'm not a very good person. And he ended up punishing her and pushing her away in his life, not allowing them to bond. So you see, the deprivations are far more powerful in many ways than the sheer stress that comes upon you. Most of the time, people in your relationship will tell you about what happened to them in it. Well, he or she was unfaithful, or the relationship broke up because, or either her parents or his parents, or because of various other things from the outside. When really, what really happened was deprivations in our relationship, and we could not heal one another. Instead, we just acted out the deprivations around each other. And we developed a sort of script that because of my deprivation, which hits upon your deprivation, we both are deprived of each other. And remember, the old brain remembers intensity more than it remembers what? Love. Because it oftentimes it confuses intensity for love. The more intense it is, the more real it seems to the old brain. Now, when we do inner healing with a person, where is the Lord going to work? In the deprivations. He's going to move into the place where your longing was, where your hopes were, that were shattered. In the places of personal fragmentation, because you compartmentalized, or I've compartmentalized the things in my life that I don't know belong together. Jesus is going to take you back to the sandbox and reparent you. And he's not going to do it all at once. He's going to do it just about each and every moment when you're ready for the next step.
Gently.
Huh?
Gently.
Gently. He's not going to, when somebody said, I told the Lord, show me who I am. And I go, no. show me who I am that I can handle dealing with. I may not recover from dealing with who I am. I want to deal with who I am according to what's best for me. You see? And that's how Jesus handles you. Okay? He brings up stuff as is needed. Children are really good at this. You'll notice when a child goes through